Welcome to Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Speaking of patrons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So a massive shout out to Maximum Gravy, Austin Whitsitt, John Kays, DL Hill, Julian Jeremiah, Tommy Swagnuts, Michael Kahn, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Will Brax, Melby Styles, Troy Shuker, Bose Nail, Samson, Maris, Hairy Blade, Mobile Mac 777, Neo the One, Lostcat FE, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Dal West Watson, Mike, Muted, Dick Earth Skeptic, Maria Nealands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, Rob H, The Real Gabster, Windrider, Liam Nedrick Jr., Abraham Mohammed, Naibai, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic936, Life is Short, Fireball X, theflatearthchannel.com, Texas Mike, Edwin Johnson and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. Now I'm going to raise the mic on whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their conversation while I set up for today's live show.
The angular distance between, say, a lighthouse, a church building, or a tower, just so they can see how far they are. And you've seen pictures of that, but they have to turn the sextant. There's the vertical angle of it, and then you could turn it sideways to get the horizontal angle as well. So there's two usages of it. So I'll dig up those slides so you can see how that works. But in the middle of the ocean, where you got, say, an island with a lighthouse on it, and then a boat, and then you could probably turn it sideways and get the angular distance between the boat and the lighthouse on the island. It should work the same way.
I see. So you're just using it to triangulate between two positions and yourself below the horizon, is that what you're saying?
Well, I'd have to look at it, but basically they do use it to get the angles between two stars in the sky as well. So you could do it just the way they do it, but it would just tell you the angle between that boat and the island where the lighthouse is.
I see.
The relationship, the in between, which is important because then if there was something else, you could draw. There's a whole step to it. So it's really not too difficult. Then they draw a line, and then where the lines cross, that's where you are in relationship to the boat and the island.
I see. That makes sense. I mean, given that it is a glorified protractor, it makes sense, right? If you need to measure the angle between two things, that's what it'll be useful for.
Yeah. I mean, it is just that, a glorified protractor. And what's lovely about it is the ballers and the anti-flat earthers just burying themselves right now. Just burying themselves because they have we're not reading, no pun intended, we're not reading into it. We're using it as it's designed to be used. I mean, the Nautical Almanac is a 90-degree book. I mean, when you think about it, until they denied it, you would never think of saying what I just said. But when they denied it, when they deny 90, they deny zenith. Well, what's a zenith? It's a 90. It's straight above you, down to you. The sextant is used from 0 to 90. And for them to say, don't say 90, it's ball game over.
Well, Brian Mitchell from Australia and us all covered the same thing on the same day, just by pure coincidence. So we're all talking about the linear relationship with Polaris dropping 1 degree per 69 miles, and that linear relationship that would have to leave you with a flat top to the roof, if you will, Rakia, heaven, whatever you want to call the sky. It's flat. Now, for this to work, in terms of the almanac and the star charts, they're all referencing it flat also. It just gets better and better.
I know. Well, when I saw, this can be so glorious. When I saw the circle of equal altitude for the very, very first time, I said, what are they telling me here? What is going on here? And that was just, I can even feel the thrill still of seeing that for the first time. I go, you mean to say that they've got this thing in the middle of a circle, and everyone on that circle is the same distance away, and if you just have one of them, you're that guy, but you're not sure where on that circle you are. You could be over there, and you could be across the way, but you're still, say, 50 degrees away, and then you do the math, and that tells you how many nautical miles you are from the GP, the sun that's 90 degrees over the Earth, zenith, and then they do a second circle to get a much better fix of one of two positions. But of course, you know which one you're on because of the previous day and your logbook and your dead reckoning and time and charts and, you know, whatever you've done to make sure you don't get lost at sea. But when you do that third circle, it just locks you in. There's no doubt whatsoever. And then that's a two-dimensional circle on the surface of a sphere. The radius line can't bend from the center of that GP to whoever's on that circle, the circumference of it. So if radius lines don't bend, it all has to be flat. And then
exactly.
Stars, and if the stars are, well, go on.
I was going to say the device itself is saying that because it's requiring is it vertices? Is that the correct term?
Angles that create a corner, which puts you into a vertex, the point right there.
The point, that's what I'm talking about. Well, that vertex is requiring two straight lines to meet it. So the whole notion of having bent lines is just destroyed by the sextant itself.
Yes, and well, they're going to admit something later, but we'll wait for that day. But the whole point is that radius from the GP to any observer on that circle, when it's just one circle of equal altitude, has to be straight. And when you bring in the second circle of equal altitude, that radius from the GP of that sun or star has to be straight. And you bring the third one, that has to be straight. And that'd be 10, 12, 15,000 miles of ocean.
Yeah, all must be flat. And there's no...
All must be flat.
And there's no, like, add in R, then take it away later, because in this instance, it makes absolutely no sense to do anything like that. You just sit there, take the angle to whatever you're measuring, and then the zenith is 90 degrees to your position below it. That's it. It's really simple. So adding in spherical assumptions and R values really isn't necessary and actually isn't done.
No, they can't. That's, you said it on your other show, very in a good summary. That's not how it's done. And to presuppose you're doing it any other way, and I can't remember how you finished it, but basically, you can presuppose all you want. But the tool, like we had on the Sextant Wars one, the tool can't work outside its boundary. I mean, it can't do angles with one of the three lines being curved. So you can throw that out with the garbage. So then you need three straight lines. All right, well, what's one of them? The sun to the GP. That's the 90, zenith, straight down. Okay, what's the other one? The one underneath it, that's why they call it perpendicular. And then it becomes a right angle, they put a box. Well, whenever you see that box, it's flat. You said it. When you see that box, that means the Earth is flat.
Yeah. The line out from where you're triangulating any of these lights in the sky to the position below the light, wherever it may be over a flat surface, is what you're going to draw your first line out to. So you're going to draw a line out that meets that, what we are calling a zenith, to the star, its GP or its ground position. Well, the two lines, the one out from your feet to that ground position below that star, and the line from the star to the ground, are going to meet at 90 degrees, which means that the ground that runs from your feet to the ground position of that star is and must be flat for this to work.
Yeah, it's an angle measuring device. You know, the right angle metal tool that carpenters have to get a square. Put that on the basketball. Does it work?
That square on a basketball.
Yeah, like that image I showed you that.
I can tell you that won't work. As being a construction worker, carpenter, flooring guy, it will not work on a basketball.
Yeah, the reason I didn't answer it, Neil, was because it goes without saying, but thank you for saying it.
Yeah, but you have to show images for some people because everyone's been so dumbed down to just believe the rhetoric. You got to show these pictures. So you put a straight ruler. Just get a ruler that's 12 inches long, made out of wood even, 1 to 12, and everything in between.
As a matter of fact, Kent, for anything curved, we have a special tool that we have to use.
Yeah.
That's my point. If we're doing anything with a curve, there's special tools that we have to use. Can't use a straight ruler.
So like if you're going to make a tile work on the floor to a corner, or a rounded, like a bullnose doorway, and you want to cut it precise, is it that tool that you slide horizontally and little pieces of straight, like nails almost, take the shape of it, and then you could put that on the tile?
Exactly. It's called freeform.
Yeah, that's it. I've seen that. I've used that. I can't remember. Now I know the name of it. But yeah, so now you get a complete matching of how to cut that tile. So it could fit nicely there. But let's get back to the sextant. It's an angle measuring device. Nothing more, nothing less. It doesn't care about anything else. It can give you an angle, though. What's an angle? Two straight lines that meet at the corner, creating a vertex. Where's theirs? Middle of the earth. You mean the assumed sphere with the assumed parallel sun rays that Eratosthenes and everybody to this day says we have? So you're assuming that somehow from the surface of the earth, which they think is curved, you use an angle measuring device, and later you can presuppose you were doing it from the center when you're actually doing it from the surface, and you say the surface is curved? Are you insane?
Yeah, it's an insane violation of the law of non-contradiction. It's insane to say that utilization of a right angle below the stars position can be met with anything other than a flat, straight line if you're doing triangulation. It can't be. It isn't. They don't. It must be flat for this to work, and it does work.
But the imagery for deception is so powerful that you have people who I've studied and watched their videos who brilliantly describe the sextant as an angle measuring device, and yet do just that.
As I said on the yesterday's show, you can correlate almost anything with anything if you've already got a presuppositional idea that the Earth's a sphere. Well, the Earth's a sphere, therefore it not being a sphere must mean it would break in this manner. Or, I observe this occurring, therefore that must be occurring because we're on a sphere. And so it goes on.
Yeah, and that's why images of that you've shown before, orthographic side-on views, is so deception. It just sows deception.
Hello, you fine folks in Discord. Try that again. Hello, you fine folks. Hello, Steve.
Morning, Nathan.
Hi there, Nathan. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much.
Anybody in Discord use the sextant argument when they talk to ballers?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Oh, you've used it?
Yeah, I use it as much as I can. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Oh, good to hear it. I didn't know it was actually getting out there and getting utilised, so good, really pleased to hear it.
Can you give us a description as how it went?
Well, depends with who you argue, you know. But it's a lot of people have they do understand. It's easy to understand. It's very how would I say? Well, I think I said it all. Easy to understand, to explain. The right angles. You need to have a flat surface in order to have a triangle. And once that you have your radius to the GP of the star that you do your reading, then you have a circle of equal altitude. Makes sense.
Beautifully summarised. Now, as much as you're saying it's nice and simple, it isn't. You know, once you understand it, it's really simple to argue. Unlike the Black Swan, which is complicated all round, really, because you've got to have a good conceptual understanding of geometry, the globe claim, and the modus tollens as explained. So, you know, while it's rock solid, it's complicated to get your head around. And in terms of triangulation and use of a sextant, again, I think it is complicated. But once you do wrap your head around it, it's very rewarding because it is so valuable.
It's going to lead them right back to January 2020.
Yeah, we're going to get straight back to the automatic assumptions of R in all cases.
No, I meant it the other way.
1st Jan 2020 is the day the Black Swan came out.
I know. I'm taking them all back there.
What, back to the geometric horizon they don't have anymore?
Yeah.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hey, Eli.
Hey, Lite.
I'm reporting live from the trenches. I'm over here in the Discord.
Yes,
The
sir.
trenches.
Good to see you in there.
Did you say you're taking him back?
The first thing I have to, the first thing I have to say is Adam here?
Not yet, no.
Okay, well,
Ahead, Eli.
I'll
Go with your
apologize
moves.
now, and I'll apologize when he gets here. 10th, forget everything I said. I was wrong.
About what?
All right, no problem. That's why I like the dialogue.
Hold on. Was this on a live show, after show, or in the after show, or in one of the chats on Skype?
In the after, not live, not after live recorded chat.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be addressed
Because you got an
publicly.
audience.
No worries. You don't need to address it.
No,
for
but
the
I like
audience.
to apologize publicly, so you know. But you're right. Anyway, you're right. I didn't do it here, so I don't have to apologize here.
It's not the apology I'm saying you don't have to do. I don't know or care, but I'm just saying if it was something that was addressed on the show, I'd want you to detail specifically what it was that you got wrong and then how it was wrong, etc. But you don't have to do that.
Oh, okay.
Not that you'd have to do it if I said you have to. Obviously, you're your own man and all that.
Yeah,
Am I,
like, this is
Nathan?
the
I don't
live
know.
show.
This cushion that you give me, you know, every week, this money pot, it's really nice.
It's just shop talk among the boys. That's all it was.
I don't know if you've noticed, actually, Eli. I wasn't going to mention this, but I will now you've said that. That Arwin, a long time ago, and then more recently Neil, but now you, are kind of the whipping boy. That is to say that you understand the arguments really well, and therefore you're worthy of a bit of a poke. A friendly poke. It's a sign of affection. I just wanted to, with certain other individuals, especially Arwin, he didn't really get that. So when we're having a jab, I blatantly got something wrong, and it developed into an hour-and-a-half row between 10th Man and Neil. Not Neil. Who was it? Brian. And, you know, all the way through, I'm going, look, this is my fault. I just said, dip angle's not that important. Dip correction's not that important. Don't worry about it. And then, obviously, towards the end of the discussion, I blamed it all on you. I'm like, so we're all in agreement except Eli. That purpose being that friendly banter, you've slipped into that role. I don't know how, but you have.
Yeah. It's cool. very much enjoy our camaraderie here. I don't have it anywhere else. So
I'm wondering why you have to explain that.
Because you and Arwin specifically didn't get it. So in advance of him not getting it, just in case he doesn't, not that I'm saying he won't, I'm going to explain it anyway, just so that anybody in the audience also, more keen fans who are going to be watching this on the Uncut and After show, will hear it also. And hear,
Who says I didn't get it?
Me. Just now, 25 seconds ago.
Well, you're wrong.
Here we go. Yes, Neil, you heard me right. I'm taking them back to the Black Swan.
Take it back. Do, take it back.
Hey, don't get me
nice.
copyright strikes.
Yeah.
well, that's a compliment.
Sorry.
You sang it so on key that the algorithms might pick it up.
No, I doubt that.
Nice one. Yeah, back to the Sextant Wars that was aired yesterday. Fantastic show. That's a keeper. I thank Brian for accelerating the process. That was actually very much needed. It was going to take forever to happen outside our own group.
Listen, if Brian has a certain way he wants to do anything, I'm not crossing him.
Brian?
No. That was the whole
Wherever
point.
Brian wants to go, that's the way it's going.
No, that was the whole point. If you use the sextant improperly, it's not going to work for you and you'll be off 20 miles or more. If you use it treating the Earth as flat, you're spot on.
Yeah, and moreover, I think Brian's dogged determination to have that drilled into us was based on the fact that the geometric principles that are applied to a sextant, i.e. the straight line that meets the GP of the star at 90 degrees, that straight line isn't straight anymore if you ignore the dip correction for your height above the flat plane that you're actually measuring. So you're measuring a straight line along the ground. Well, obviously, if you're 100 foot above the ground, you've got to correct for that. And by just saying, oh, well, on a boat, if you're, 20 feet above, it doesn't really matter. You might be off by a couple of miles. He didn't like that. Because what I'm then doing is basically saying the geometric principle of a straight, flat line to the GP below the star, it doesn't really matter. Now, that does deserve a slap on my part. Now, Brian's too polite. He didn't want to blame me. It was entirely my fault, but for some reason, he just didn't want to. He kept on saying, it's not Nathan's fault. I'm like, yeah, it is. But he was having a blazing row with 10th, whilst not accepting the fact that 10th was agreeing with him. I disagreed with him up until the point that I realised my mistake. I went, hang on, actually, that is critical. Bloody hell, I better agree quick here. So I did.
Well, okay, you got to look at it from all sides here, though. Okay, so when a casual navigator who's really probably 15, 16 feet above the water at most, and sometimes 10 for the most part, because a lot of them are just on small sailboats, they can get away with it and be off, but it doesn't change the fact that the sextant still measured 3 straight lines, but you held it wrong. So it doesn't change anything. Now the professionals, the Navy, the merchants, the shipping companies, they get everything right. You have to do it because you need to be within a half mile to a mile of where you're going. If your electronic equipment breaks down, this is the only tool you got. I mean, really, it doesn't need anything. It's not run on batteries. You just need to be able to see a star. That's one of the 64 navigational stars. The horizon, for the most part, can be seen as long as it's daylight. Right? So, I mean, they got this thing down. When you watch all the videos, you can see how good they are at it. So, yeah, so basically, the argument helps us because we're saying, oh, so what you're saying is when used properly and treating the Earth's surface as totally flat to the GP with a radius line that doesn't bend, it works perfectly, which means we live on a flat plane.
With a flat ceiling. So,
yeah.
With Brian covering this, Mitchell covering this, us covering it, I hope it'll just, pop into the flat Earth realm real fast when people start figuring this out. Like, yeah, we've got a flat roof to it. When you're measuring that linear relationship, 1 degree every 69 miles, that's a linear relationship. It's not a squared function. I was smiling from ear to ear when I was listening to Mitchell from Australia talking about this yesterday. I'm thinking, yeah, we're covering this at the moment, Mitchell. It's a flat sky. and the relationship that you're taking off your measurements when you measure the angle to it is working on that principle. You know, you've got a GP below them, but if you were to draw it on a flat 2D piece of paper, like we do, you just draw all the stars at the same exact level, don't you? And then you draw your angle to them. You're not drawing them at various different heights at millions of miles away. Far from it. They're all just assumed at the same height, with a GP below them and a straight line to them on a flat plane. And it works. It's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, we're the first ones to say we don't know when we don't know. But if we take how the sextant works, the zenith position means the star's directly over that place on the Earth. That's why they get to call it a geographic position.
Exactly. It's got a name, it's got a function, and it does what it does. Now, people then twist that and say, well, are you asserting that you've got a height for the position of that star? I'd say no. Number one, I don't know what it is. Number two, I've got no way of physically verifying it. I don't know its angular. I don't know its actual size, rather. So there's a whole bunch of information that would be missing to make that further extrapolation about the stars. However, how they function, how they are used, who am I to argue? That's how they're used.
Yep.
They've changed the way the live streaming starts. So yesterday we lost half the introduction to the live show because what I'd normally press to go live doesn't make you go live anymore. It connects to the server, double checks that your stream's okay, and then you have to go in manually and press a button on the actual window rather than a button on my stream deck. So it's like, bloody hell. So I've actually got to go in and press a mouse button. So I'm going to start a couple of minutes early. Not that I'm saying it's imperative that you don't take that to mean go quiet. Because that's not what I'm saying.
No, I know what you're saying.
Can I just ask 10th Man a quick question about the
I hope you
sextant?
do. Yes, please.
Yeah, if you were in a, say you were in a room on a ship and you had walls all around you, but you could see the stars above you, could you just assume the horizon measurement to be 90 degrees off plumb and then just work your angle from there?
Well, you're basically describing what they do on the airplane with a bubble sextant, where they have, you can see the World War II pictures of it, where they have a clear glass or plastic, whatever it's made out of, and the navigator inside the plane lining up his sextant to a star that's seeing through that glass or plastic, and he's got a bubble sextant, so the bubble shows him what 90 is. And on really bad days, you can even pull out an artificial horizon, and you do it that way. Yeah. So it's see the reason we use the horizon, or they say we use the horizon, is because it's the easiest thing that you can cite, because it'd be pretty hard to try to get vertical first.
Yeah.
But if you got horizontal right, then you got vertical.
No, but the plumb would establish the vertical, and that's just hanging a string with a weight on it, which I think would be even easier than trying to identify your horizontal plane.
Not in the ocean, because you're on a boat that's moving, tossing around. It's very difficult. That's why I use the horizon.
True.
Welcome. Flat Earth Debate live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by 10th Man, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Greetings, everybody.
Hey, hey.
Hello.
How are you?
We're all good, very enthusiastic, considering there's only a couple of you in G+. How are you all in Discord? We practiced this in the pre-show.
Great.
Thanks.
I'm on top of the world.
Top of the world? Top of what world?
You gotta end it off with Ma. I'm on top of the world, Ma.
Yeah, that's part of heliocentric programming as far as I can ascertain.
Sounds like a boxer.
Up is up
No,
for
that's
all of us.
Humphrey
on the
Bogart.
plane.
That's James Cagney.
Yeah, thank you for that, Neil. The expansion on what you just said was so welcomed.
welcome.
And
You know, Neil does have the movie lines.
so being on top of the world would be a gravitational assertion. In other words, you're always on the top of the sphere. It's always positioned from your vantage point at the top of a sphere. You're looking down towards the curve that's dropping away from you 8 inches per mile squared. The top of the world thing is just heliocentric programming as far as I know.
I don't think James Cagney meant it that way.
Matthew Capucci does.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Hey, Arwin. Yeah, I trimmed that out. I was keen to get that out there because I'd messaged him. I thought if I'd messaged somebody that I haven't actually put the video out for yet, because I was hoping he'd join the show. vain hope of that happening. But nevertheless, I just chopped it down, put it together and put it out last night so that it was there. And I think I went onto his Facebook and shared the link with him. But we were reasonably polite, other than me calling him a dick at one point. Yes, Nathan, I thought it was a great show yesterday. Glad you edited it. I'm really pleased to know that. Worthwhile doing all this work.
What?
I thought it was a great show. I was refraining from reading that because I thought you were going to yell at me for bringing something ridiculous like that.
On the contrary, several people in the comment section noted that they'd been confronted with similar things. So a guy mentioned, a black guy on TikTok was saying the exact same thing and that was shoved under my nose. And you're like, oh, right, okay. So this particular argument is being punted out there at the moment. You know, it's a little bit Vsauce-esque in terms of moving out towards the centre of a pancake when gravity's still in effect. You know, it's a very similar vein of argument. But these things are secular, right? They come round and around and around. And it doesn't matter if it's 8 months, 12 months, 16 months, whatever. They just recycle the same old garbage. So the fact that this particular person has dipped his toe into the water of flat Earth to the tune of one Google search with that term exactly, tap, 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 flat Earth, straight to the Flat Earth Society controlled op narrative to see what they say, and then stereotype fallacy the hell out of everybody else who actually understands a little bit more about science, the nature of the world that we're living in, how the heliocentric model works, how gravity works, how atmosphere, sphere-shaped air works, how begging the question fallacies, false dichotomies, and affirming the consequence work. All of which is not going to be privileged information for somebody who's just throwing up this strawman fallacy of how a disk Earth works with gravity on it.
You know what else I noticed, Nathan, as I read the article? they'll bring up something like the Mad Mike guy who died doing launching a rocket, just to make it look like, you know, we're stupid, and it turns fatal for somebody to believe in this flat Earth. He threw that in the article too.
Okay, that's one dude. Okay, Mad Mike, who was doing rocket launches long before flat Earth. Hello? Mad Mike was doing rocket launches long before flat Earth came around, and that got him a certain level of publicity that he wanted. Now, we all know how ineffective and unuseful travelling up a few hundred feet in a bloody rocket's going to be. I mean, what exactly was he trying to achieve? See the curve of the Earth, or see how flat it was? Well, the horizon's not Earth curve, and there are a lot more efficient ways of getting up high than using a steam-powered rocket. It is bonkers. Now, anybody here would assert different ideas about how you would debunk the spherical Earth, and none of them would involve steam-powered rockets.
Yeah, but the way he threw it
I
in
should
there,
hope so.
they did it for a reason, trust me. They're very crafty with how they do things. Oh, look, it turns fatal for this guy to believe in flat Earth.
Well,
Did he, though?
But it's not his belief in flat Earth that killed him. It was his desire to go up in steam-powered rockets that killed him.
I know that.
But how much did he even believe in it?
Enough to get a banner on the side of it.
But he wanted to, like, advertise, but how did he even know any arguments? Did he really, or did he just seek attention?
I think he just sought attention. I don't know how many arguments he knew. I mean, whenever I saw him interviewed, he wasn't putting across great globe debunkings or flat Earth proofs. He's just talking about his rocket.
Remember, he's the sort of guy that wants to
with
be
us.
tossed up in a steam rocket.
Yeah, crazy guy. Now, the fact that a crazy guy understands that the Earth is flat, does that tarnish every flat earther? Well, it does if you utilise stereotyping fallacies, which our opponents do. Well, are there not insane people who believe they're on a sphere? Oh, yes, there are many, many, many bonkers people who think they're on a sphere. I mean, literally, clinically bonkers people who still think like everyone else does that they're on a sphere, even though it's an outrageous claim. So should we tar everybody on the globe side of the argument as being clinically insane? Because there are clinically insane people who think they're on a sphere. No, that's just a stereotyping fallacy.
You could almost say it would make you... Yeah, there is a stereotyping fallacy, but again, to believe you're on a ball is almost to that level of clinically insane when you take in all of the information that is pushed out there.
I agree.
By them.
I agree, and that's applicable only to anti-flat earthers, though. So if you approach somebody who's been indoctrinated into a cult from birth, they're probably perfectly normal, reasonable people in many respects. They're just people. However, their views on whatever the cult has brainwashed them with are those views. Doesn't mean that they're suddenly clinically insane. However, once that person has had it explained to them to the point where they can understand and recognise it, if they still choose to side with something that's clearly not true after explanation, then that is insane. Now, for me, because the mass society normies who don't appreciate any better and aren't in any way capable of being classified as broadly as, you know, all flat earthers are nuts because Mad Mike went up in a steam rocket, you know, because you've got a certain proportion of them that have fallen off the wagon of globe belief because they've come across us and are now in what I would, describe as a not insane, but definitely cognitively painful position. And that could potentially push you over the edge of insanity eventually. In other words, it would be a concerning position to be cognitively fighting with the nature of Earth, the assumptions of the obvious and observable navigatably flat plane that we live on and fly across. All of those things you're going to process if you're fallen from the, you know, whatever the word is, ignorance of being on a globe and not caring. And just saying, yeah, well, we just know, without giving it a second thought. Well, those people, some of them will descend into insanity eventually.
Eventually, so yeah. Yeah, they're more informed by the insane and are yet to be insane because of the lack of understanding. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Well, they want to project that out onto us as well. The anti-flat earthers project out onto us how we're cult-like and insane. You're like, well, actually, no, I don't have any problems whatsoever cognitively or functionally or societally even when I go out and, perform my normie duties as a father or as a grocery shopper or as a consumer. I don't have any problems. I'm not constantly worried about the nature of reality. When I do think about it, it's an absolute joy. Now, by contrast, our opponents who spend hours and hours and hours and hours arguing in comments with the same old fallacies again and again and again, ignoring all responses, that's going to be painful. Now, I have no desire or need or requirement to do any of those things, but our opponents on the anti-flat earth side do feel like we are someone to have a war with. It's like, no, I'm just going about my day. Go on.
Well, again, we are the people that are effectively destroying the reality that they believe that they live in, right? So, again, anyone that questions the underlying fabric of where you're living on is someone to be seen as an enemy, right? People would find it too painful. Again, that word painful, right? Much like the moon landings, they find it too painful to adjust their minds. And I would say that was just, again, that would be something that would be indoctrinated into us almost. This idea of like not moving from one perspective to the next, because to do so effectively is almost to call yourself a liar, right? If you dump one idea for the next, you're a liar, right? This is the way that the world makes it, and actually, it's actually just something that would make you intellectually honest. In fact, actually, not a liar. It's the opposite, but they like to portray it that way.
It's a trait of more a higher state of intellectual being rather than a lower one. Being able to recognise something that you has held as true, reassess it, and then realise that it isn't, and change your position, change your mind. That's something that more intellectual people do rather than less intellectual.
You've got to think about the nature of the world in and of itself, right? This plane that we live on, when in fact that is propositioned as something that's the opposite of what it actually is. The intellectually honest man is now defined as the liar unto himself if he adjusts his position at all. That's a terrible sort of, and I'm glad there are people like us that are actually challenging that and actually laying out the logical framework of changing a logical framework. How terrible it is that we actually have to lay out the logical framework of how to change your logical framework. That's
You've got to appeal to people to want that mentally, and most of them don't. It's far easier to be told what is what and just abide by what you've been told. And the extreme of that is that you'll move heaven and earth to keep your cognitive bias. And we see that in pseudoscience all the time. When they talk about Earth maintaining a central position and this not being acceptable, that's a good example of that. We want to maintain our bias that we're not in a position of any sort of special nature, centre of anything. No, that's just not allowed. That's not acceptable. You go, well, why not? Because it doesn't conform with your current preconceived beliefs about a sphere Earth in a heliocentric model. So therefore it's not acceptable. It's like, what are you actually discussing here? You're discussing a philosophy. And you're deciding that the philosophy that's going to be reified by the masses is not acceptable because it doesn't match with what you've already decided the world is. You're like, okay, well, I don't want to buy into any of that crap. I don't have to. And it doesn't affect me that I don't have to buy that crap. But the people who do want to buy that crap and then come here and tell us how it's true, they're the ones actually preaching to us, trying to convert us back into their sphere belief religion, not the other way around. But they'll tell us that we're cultish. It's like, we're not on an indoctrination drive. We're not trying to recruit people into this way of being. Far from it. When we describe how we've been lied to and explain how it doesn't jive with reality, that's not us trying to indoctrinate anybody. It's trying to uneducate them in the nonsense that they've been taught to date.
But even the suggestion that it is a form of indoctrination, it's like, well, why would we go to the effort in order to, put the effort in order to put this across to people in a way that they can understand in order for indoctrination? Obviously, again, the idea that someone would do that obviously comes, and I think they unconsciously know this to be true. That's why they would label us indoctrinators. To label us indoctrinators would suggest that they understand what indoctrination is, right? So again, you're exactly right. It's cognitive dissonance. It's like, again, I have to label them as that in order that what I've been through is not that itself, right? That's really the place that it comes from. Something that's actually interesting that happened today is we were speaking to a theoretical physicist, right? And I took him through the black swan. We actually took him through lots of different things. Me and Eli did this together, and he was very intellectually honest and was able to admit these things. I've added him as a friend. He was a little bit inebriated, But I could tell that he knew that what he was talking about in terms of in his field, right? So yeah, it's someone that I've added as a friend, and hopefully he did say he would be willing to come and speak with people at a time when he was less inebriated. But I feel like it would be a good conversation for people to hear, because he effectively heard us guys talking last night, and he simply was looking at the comments section and was like, wait a minute, everyone's saying these people are crazy, but from his own field, he understands, let's say, that the issues with inside of peer review, for instance, that these axioms that have to be meted out, these tangents effectively that have to intersect in order for this thing to be true, affirming the consequence type fallacies. And he was able to say that he effectively has seen this with inside of his field, right? And that it's effectively a circle jerk. And I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And he was very intellectually honest. And it's good that we're presenting the information the way that we are, because, like he said, that he had never took this seriously, and he saw it as more of like a macabre, like satire type thing, fairies and all this sort of stuff. When he's listened to people like Professor Dave, who are just straw manning us, right, and not representing anything that we actually say.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it's positioned at surface level. And I think a lot of the times, like with the guy we covered yesterday, their surface level research and laziness perpetuates out that surface level bullshit to the masses. So that's good enough, really. You only need to scratch the surface a little bit to realise that what you're calling Professor Dave surface level bullshit. For most people, that's enough. They'll have a cursory glance at what they find when they do a search in YouTube, and what they will find is anti-flat earthers. And the anti-flat earther throws up a straw man, or maybe a false dichotomy to go with it, and people just go, yeah, I thought it was silly, and off they go.
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's them not wanting to actually challenge what it is that they believe at the end of the day, because the status quo is always easier. Like, people don't want these sort of like fast jive emotions, but again, everything that's sort of going on in the world is kind of like, this is sort of a consciousness thing that I believe is going to be, should I say, more predominant now in terms of across the masses, because people are starting to see that they're going to be made to be uncomfortable, even if they wish to sort of stupor in their ignorance and go along ignorance and in bliss, right? That their bliss may be disturbed by outside influences regardless. So again, it'd be good to sort of see the way that people might be more willing to effectively go, oh, okay, maybe I'll scratch beneath that sort of surface level in order to see a little bit further, because once the the different parts of their reality are sort of adjusted by other outside influences, maybe they might want to start taking some sort of responsibility for that, what it is that they believe themselves, due to the fact that they realize that, right, that someone else can come in and change it without them.
No, they'll look for someone else to do it for them. So that's what people like Professor Dave represent. They represent well, I kind of want to go out and either affirm what I already know or disprove it, but it would be much easier if someone else had already done that for me. I'll have a look, see who else has done that for me. Oh, look, Professor Dave has done it for me. What does Professor Dave say? Because people are lazy.
Yeah. If it is laziness at this point at best, right? The information is there, right? We have people effectively in the scientific community, scientific explainers, and then you have people like us as well that are willing to sort of walk people through these things, and sometimes actually, again, like, we're wasting energy when we do so, but we do so regardless, right, in pursuit of truth and understanding, right? But it's often a bit of a shame where it ends up lining up in terms of people being so lazy. And I sometimes just think it's a general lacking in people's ability to perceive and understand these ideas. I've sort of noticed that, again, like, this sort of view of the world, right, from the outside of the world, from space, right, taking that sort of position that people need these representative images from people like NASA, for instance, right? And I believe they need that orthographical sort of view, right? It's because they maybe don't have that sort of way of thinking in their brain. And I'm starting to realize that some people don't. Like, me and Flat Earth Solar were talking about this the other day. There's a rebacking.
What's a conceptual spatial awareness and being able to process
Exactly that.
what's been presented in 2D or Muppet vision, not being able to cognitively realise that that's not what you're presented with in reality. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, effectively, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, is that some people are lacking this capability to go into their own mind and effectively take their point of view away from something in order to look at it from a different perspective. So they need these representations, or they need people to do this for them, because they've yet to utilize that form of their brain. And this sort of follows with linearized curriculum, right? We are all sort of learning in the same fashion, in the same way for so long. And this becomes people are sort of general practitioners. They're never actually experts in anything. But again, you can be a general practitioner, understand the vernacular of something, and then delve into it deeper. It doesn't mean you have to stick with one topic. You can continue to go forth and do so. It's an exercise of that form of modality of understanding that you can change, your perspective and understand. Maybe it's just, in relation to where the sun might be versus, where it should be, going, higher up, for instance, understanding, higher in latitude or longitude. Sorry, higher in. I mix them two up every time. But yeah, you get my overall point, is that there's a general lacking in people's capability to take themselves away from where they're stood and go to a different place in order to look at things. And that's sort of what I'm noticing in people a lot of recent, and that's why they sort of look to these other organizations in order to sort of show that for them. Again, just I would ask people to sort of try to exercise that muscle in order to understand things, because it does aid you.
Yeah, right. Again, on the last few shows, we've been saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Well, you can't make people want to process their world when they've literally intentionally gone out and sought out the people who have done it for them so that they don't have to.
You can lead a glober to water, but you can't make him think.
Exactly. You can't give people critical thought. Critical thinking skills aren't something that's taught in the normal education system. And most people don't have those skills. And if you haven't exercised them from a reasonably early age, you may never, ever exercise them or realise what critical thinking even is. Let alone exercising an ability to do decent research. Like I say, if you're watching something like a Professor Dave video, you're relying on that person to have done all the research. Now, if you haven't got critical thinking skills, you're not going to recognise the logical fallacies that are employed. You'll just take it all as read and move on with your day. That's most people. Most people don't think, I'm gonna really criticise or be skeptical of what this person's saying and actually look into what he says is his research. I'll see if I can dig out his primary source information and verify what it actually claims. And if it's claiming science, I'll see if it adheres to the method. Things like that. Most people have absolutely zero desire to do.
It's so true as well, because it even goes, and that conforms as well. That same framework conforms to the idea of measurement or direct measurement, right? People don't try to, let's say, understand the various methods or means in which you would do so. The same way they don't try and, someone says this is scientific, they don't run it through the scientific method. They just assume that person may have done so for them, or they don't even understand that there is a scientific method. Right, and the scientific method, the scientific community are actually eating their own tail. And I was saying about this earlier. It's like an Ouroboros, right? A snake eating its own tail, where they keep releasing these, articles that are effectively outlining how the scientific method is effectively a myth. Right, and I'm like, wait, like you can type this in. Anyone can type this in, the myth of methodology, right? And an article will come up, and it's like they're talking about how the scientific method in the field of science really boxes us in. It's like, well, yeah, we get it. The scientific method is reductive as a means to actually denote cause and effect relationships. There's a reason why it is that way, why it is rigorous and rigid. There's a reason why. It doesn't mean certain things can't be true if they don't follow. And I feel like that's the common misunderstanding with a lot of globers, is like when I talk to them about the scientific method, they go, well, other things can still be true. I'm like, yeah, of course, other things can be true, but they can't be scientifically validated. Again, it's like this misinterpretation of like, oh, well, if it isn't able to be run through the scientific method, you're just outright saying that this thing doesn't exist. We're not necessarily saying something doesn't exist. It's just that it doesn't fall under the vernacular of science. It doesn't go into those fields at all.
They want to have their cake and eat it. They want to be able to express empiricism. That would be, say, what I am stating here is fact. And they want that magic. And in terms of the narrow method of science, that would be the scientific method, then describing it as boxing them in, you say, yeah, it is. It's boxing you in so that when you do it, it's giving you an empirical outcome. Now, if you want to say, well, yeah, but it's quite a pain in the ass to actually achieve empiricism, I'd much rather it was a bit more broad, a bit more expansive. I just make up a story and call it science. And hopefully the magic of people understanding that because I've said science, not the narrow one that's empirical, but my one that's a bit more broad, they'll understand that it's absolute fact even though it's not validated in any way, shape or form. And that's what I'd prefer science was described as. Now, if you look at what pseudoscience is, it's the claim of science where it has not been through the method of science. That's what pseudoscience is. So if somebody says, I would prefer it was a bit more broad, you're like, well, you are by definition pseudoscience.
You prefer pseudoscience then? Yeah, of course. Like,
So yeah, it is narrow. The scientific method is extremely narrow. And unfortunately, that means that unless you've done it, you won't have the empiricism that it has on offer by way of the methodology that has been set in stone. Well, that methodology won't give you something that you can describe as empirical if you haven't done it. Well, that's annoying. I just want to look at that starry night and describe how it's blah, 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 and call that science so that everyone just agrees with me. That would be far easier, wouldn't it?
exactly that, Nathan. Exactly that, and that's the main issue. Is that, yeah, again, like, cool. You want to be able to apply this in a wilder field, but I feel like it's like the word science has been like deified almost, right? And it's not something that's just used to explain that this thing has been through this method, right? People have forgot that. They forgot the antecedent relationship to what science is. And in doing so, the different various people that would like to sort of push out pseudoscience are just capitalizing on it massively. Like, they really have. They've capitalized on it so much. And then so much so that there's been this quantitative easing toward this idea that they could say that the myth is a myth, that they say, because then they can actually show examples where, well, this is a form of science and it doesn't apply to it. So it's like a reversal almost of, like, like I said, an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, right? So it's kind of like, well, are you guys disagreeing then with where the foundation of science is itself? And that's what I would challenge, is that, again, if you don't wish to adhere to the scientific method and you want to misappropriate it and you want to commit pseudoscience, right, which I like to say commit it because it's like a crime to me anyway, then cool, like, have your own little world. But again, don't try and say we're crazy for trying to keep people on track. We're actually doing the work of which the people that created this methodology would be very pleased of, that we're keeping it at a rigorous level, that we want it to be rigid, and we're reminding people of the rigidity of it.
Indeed. But the majority of what is claimed as science out there isn't science. And at some level, they're going to appreciate that the word itself has power, and they don't want to relinquish that power. So they say, well, as I haven't got the actual power of Grayskull in my quasi-experiment that I'm claiming, I'd prefer if that actual scientific method just was claimed to be just a myth. The myth of empiricism. There's nothing we can really do to validate this completely, but I'm going to call it science so you don't question it. You just understand it's true. I'll give you a load of statistics and say science. Now, if we all just forget that there is actually an empirical method somewhere out in the midst of time that's been forgotten about, then we'll all just remember, because we're all still taught at school that science is empirical, that my version of that is empirical, right? And you're like, no. But it would be really convenient for you if everyone forgot about the fact that you haven't done the empirical method that you're utilising with your language to make everyone think that what you're saying is empirical. Yeah, if we all just forgot about the empirical method, the magic trick wouldn't work. That's why you're saying the snake is eating its own tail. In other words, if we didn't all get taught in 5th grade that science was a method of empiricism and the result at the end of the process was an empirical, unchangeable result, then we wouldn't have your magic trick when you said that word anymore. You'd say science and you'd go, oh, right, so it's just a story you're making up. No, it's empirical. well, didn't you want the method that we were taught to recognise the magic of its empiricism? Didn't you want that absolved from school? None of us have been taught that anymore, so we don't trust what you say when you just say science anymore, because we weren't taught that it was empirical, because you didn't like that method being in existence because it discredited your stories, didn't it?
Did you compare the use of the word science to the power of Grayskull?
I did.
That's awesome.
I know, I chuckled when he did so too, Chocolate. Good to hear your voice. If not, I was like, where's he been?
It's like a sword that they draw out. They draw out a sword.
What's up, brother?
They draw out the metaphorical equivalent of the sword of Eternia and go, science! And you go, that was maths. There wasn't any science. Yeah, but let's just forget that there's an empirical method. We've broadened our horizon from the dusty old empiricism that we used to say science was when you were taught it. Now we just come up with a story and would prefer to forget about the fact that we haven't done the science bit.
Again, and then we
You're
get
onto
blamed.
something.
We get
Wait,
blamed.
So that's
you're onto something
forward
with
here.
that, because that's what
So
he
that's-
says when he... Go ahead.
I'm sorry, man. I was gonna say, so that's funny. So now when they say science doesn't prove things, that's literally them taking the power away. That's literally He-Man going back to Adam. Like, oh, we thought we was He-Man real quick, but oh, we realized that we don't have science, so let's just go back to Adam and Cringer. Because science
That's what I
doesn't
was
prove
going
things.
to say. They
Hilarious.
say, when they grab that science sword, they say, like He-Man says, or Adam before he becomes He-Man, I have the power!
Like, no, we didn't. Science doesn't prove things. No, we didn't.
Yeah, it's the end of the anti-flat
And that's
earth
the
circle
Ouroboros.
jerk. You've got them asserting that science proves things. The whole body of science proves we're on a sphere. We've got the science, blah, 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 blah. And then when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of it saying, okay, where's your science? That would be the application of the scientific method. They'll tell us all day long about how science doesn't prove things. So it's like you've pulled out your science sword, told us how it's science, but then will later tell us how science doesn't prove anything. So why were you telling us about how much science you had? When the reality of it is they come along, assert that they've got science, and they haven't. And when you call them on it and say you haven't got any science, they say it doesn't matter, science doesn't prove anything. Yes, it does. That's all it does. It proves the cause if you validate a hypothesis. And if you don't, it still proves that you haven't got the correct cause. So you varied something and it didn't cause it. You proved it wasn't that. So at the end of the process, all you're going to do is prove something. You're either going to go, that was the cause of it, or that wasn't the cause of it. In both cases, proving something. So that's all it does. But they'll literally tell you science doesn't because they haven't got any.
Well, that's why the scientific method is reductive. That's what it does, like you just stated. This is becoming pull out the sword of science. It's like this is becoming increasingly fallacious.
Yeah, but M. Scott Veach, I got into many arguments with him. He says that was the beginning of science. Now we're at the higher stage of science.
Oh, yeah. So basically, it used to be the dusty old proving things. Now we've evolved beyond proving things. That's what that statement says, Neil.
Is that not the
Correct.
counterintuitive, Neil? So the higher, newer science has lower standards of
Yes.
empiricism.
Yeah, and that's what M. Scott Veach is involved in, isn't it? Technology. Yeah? Computer science. And that's not science. Far from it. What an oxymoron. Computers are man-made. You're not going to establish the cause of naturally occurring phenomena in a computer now, aren't you? But that would be lots of mathematics. Yeah, programming. Yeah. That's not science. That's not a study of the physical and natural world. Yeah? It's technology. But it doesn't sound as good, does it? And when you tell people about your technology, people go, oh, that's really nice. When you tell them about your computer science, they offer you a lot more respect. Until you ask them about whether or not you've done any experiments. And then you tell them about the dusty old experiments with their dusty old empiricism and proving things. Who needs to prove things?
as well. They
guys
use
are
like the computer science thing. It's like, well, the
empiricism.
computer works, so therefore it is science. Again, that's the.
Nothing wrong with that.
They're basically telling us that empiricism is the old and busted, and pseudoscience is the new hotness.
Yeah.
That's basically what they're saying.
As you would if you're a pseudoscientist. Likewise, if everybody's out there buying Electrolux vacuums and you've got a Kirby to sell, well, then your Kirby vacuum is significantly better than the dusty old Electrolux. Obviously, you've got the best, hottest, newest, most functional on the planet, because we are on a planet. Science says so. What's that you say? Where's my experiment? You don't need to prove things. I just say science.
Yeah, well, he says their science took them to the moon, and we'll take them further.
Oh, really? No. They have a second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum to traverse to get to the moon now, don't they, Neil? And their claims of empiricism, that would be stating as fact that they went to the moon. Proof? Why? Well, because of empiricism, that would be science. Well, what kind of science? All of this technology. Oh, so if rockets then sky vacuum travel? Definitely not. But what's that you say, science? Where's the experiment? These rockets. Well, that's not experiments. That's not cause and effect validated by systematic experimentation. That's not science. That's technology. That doesn't prove you went to a sky vacuum. But what's that? If you said science, most people would believe you did. Yeah, we know. They couldn't not have been to the moon. They calculated how much fuel they used. How could they have not been? They calculated how much fuel they used.
How did they do that without a radius?
Yeah, they're going to need a radius.
These pathetic losers, right, base a load of stuff on a lot of nothing, and they have the cheek to tell you that your smartphone proves globe. When your smartphone is based around quantum mechanics originally. They are absolute losers. They're intellectually in the toilet. Right, that's what they are, right? They're losing the tiniest amount of respect I ever had for them. They're losing it from me now. I'm not talking about the normie, the ordinary people out there. I'm talking about the people that claim things. And I'm not just talking about anti-flat earthers. I'm talking about all of them, all these supposed claimants, you know, all these Neil deGrasse Tysons, all the rest of them.
Why even go to the smartphones, man? Didn't Sabina say, oh, you're wearing glasses. Therefore, we're living in the globe. Because science. What? What are you talking about, lady? Are you out of your mind? Are you all out of your minds with this crap that you call science and now tell us that your science doesn't prove shit? This is insane. Living on a damn ball. Did we do housekeeping yet?
No, we didn't. That's okay. I don't mind. It's all good.
Are there ballers in Discord?
Any ballers in Discord?
We have Conrad.
Virus is there.
Virus tends to pipe up when we've got something specific about him, so I don't really count him. He's more than willing to participate when he's required to. But hey, Virus, hello. Oh, they're going to stop
Not Virus, D the V.
V the V, hello.
No, D to the V is not a Glober. 100% he's been mislabeled there. I know him quite well.
Maybe not whoever asked that question. Okay, I'm just going to bring up, if you type into Google, pseudoscience meaning, this is what you get. A collection of beliefs or practices mistakenly regarded as being based on scientific method. Pretty straightforward.
That kind of sucks for them.
Zero.
So beliefs or practices. So that could be mathematics, could be heliocentrism, that philosophy. When you say science, you're mistakenly claiming it as science because it hasn't been through the method. It is as simple as that. Yeah, that's old and busted, right, Chocolate?
Oh,
Nathan,
definitely.
I brought out a video there last night. One or two videos. One was about Rumpus, but the other one's about Sean Hawkins and his Polaris challenge. All the borders are pushing this Polaris nonsense. Did for 6 years, right? It's been explained to him over and over again. And what it is, it's been shown, it's been demonstrated. No, they're too dishonest. They won't. And Hawkins has been pushing it, and he's been talking recently as if no one's listening to him, and people are running away from this challenge. It's like the guy is an absolute fundy, right? He is only interested in one explanation, and that's his globe fundamental explanation. That's all he's interested in. So, and I had enough of him, because even Bev is putting out a thing for him, promoting this thing, promoting Sean Hawkins, because the ballers won't promote him, right? So I made it very clear in a very short video that neither C nor R exists. There is no one-way speed of light measurement. There is no radius value measurement, right? They don't exist, right? So how can you have your Polaris 443 light years away, a huge, massive star, right? 443 light years away from your globe? Can't, right? And I showed how, in reality, the angles to Polaris on a globe don't work to the Polaris we see, the light we see in the sky. You can't see it from their equator. You couldn't see it from their equator. Not can't, you couldn't see it from their equator. And all I'm getting in the comments is how one guy actually started saying C and R are not part of the calculation for Polaris. It's like, yeah, because it's on a flat plane. You know, they're literally admitting right there that C and R have nothing to do with their Polaris claim. Well, if C and R have nothing to do with your Polaris claim, you don't have a claim, you idiots.
Right, they've got a linear relationship as they move. So 1 degree every 69 miles. This was getting covered yesterday by Mitchell from Australia. And I'll tell you what, I was smiling from ear to ear as he was detailing it. We covered this on the pre-show, Brian. So it seems like several of us are all converging on the same points about the flat sky, flat ground, linear relationship, parallel lines between all of these GP positions, the flat plane that you've got to have beneath your feet to measure them, how it functions. All of this stuff is all being covered at the same time, which is wonderful. But there's a linear relationship. There's not a squared function going on when you do this, right?
No,
yeah,
I disagree.
QE was stating that in the war room there, like.
Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah,
by the simple fact that you
I disagree too.
the function as a degree.
Go on, Adam.
By the fact you're putting different units in there. So if you weren't putting the units of degrees describes the curve. Now, to apply it to real life, those units are useless until you put an R in. And then you have to convert it, and it won't be a linear function. You get things like the approximation to a curve as 8 inches per mile. But the fact that you've got the degrees in there without any other units, it's just the circle, until you quantify it with R, it's fine, because the degrees are describing that curve exactly, aren't they? Because that's what degrees are. They're a description of curve, of a circle specifically.
I would tear that apart by stating they're bringing angles to Polaris, something impossible on a curved surface. That'd be number one. And number two, what they're actually using is north-south along the longitude lines, regardless of if they talk about latitude. It's going along the longitude lines.
That's all right. You're still right.
The longitude distance.
You're still correct, Brian.
Yep.
So if you imagine your longitude lines, you've got your...
No, you didn't leave me finish.
Oh, okay, go on then.
The longitude lines are the same exact distance, flat or curved.
Yes.
Can you have angles?
But hold on. What Adam's saying
on the
is...
curved surface.
What Adam's saying is, by using degrees, you're setting your compass or your protractor at the middle of the presupposed spherical Earth, and saying that as you move round it, it's dropping in a certain degree value in reference to the presupposed centre. So he's saying just by having degrees, you're assuming that the protractor's in the middle of the sphere when you make the measurements, right, Adam?
Correct, yeah. So you've already presupposed it's in there, that the curve function is in there. I say, What you have to do to put it in onto their ball earth is assign an R value. And then when you do that, you can then convert the degrees into other real life units. Then you don't have a linear function anymore because you have to express it and convert everything. It won't be linear. But it will look a bit linear if you just describe it as degrees and miles. But it isn't because the degrees curve it.
But it is linear because you just use the center of the globe.
He's not denying that. But what he's saying is that just by saying 1 degree every 69 miles, you open up their assumption to transpose onto the centre of a sphere just by pure fiat, just by pure assumption. You've got to have the R because you're saying degrees. Now, what you would rebut that with is, well, the degree is the measurement that you take from the flat surface with your sextant, right? And you're correct. And the function that you're actually observing is linear, also correct. But it doesn't change the fact that they can automatically infer the spherical nature by using degrees off the bat. Now, I hadn't appreciated that till Adam said that. Now, maybe you do, but I'm saying until now I didn't recognise that. Just by saying degrees, they've already got the path split in two. Well, degrees of what? Well, degrees from the centre of a sphere, they would say.
They've built a
Yeah, I ran into the. I ran into
measurement
when I attempted. My bad. Go ahead.
They've built the ball earth and they've defined the measurement that you've then taken as that ball earth falling away or falling back on you. That's as soon as you use that degrees in respect to the ball earth, it defines the geometry of the ball earth, and therefore there is no linear. It's a circle. Every bit of it is a different part of the circle. So to calculate, say, if after 10 degrees, yeah, you've got 690 miles. That's 690 miles of circumferential distance. Yeah, it's applicable to that circumference. That's what they're saying. The curve's already in there because it's functioned by the degrees, and by once you put R in, then it defines what the actual physical drop is, not just as a mathematical ratio of it as a degree.
Correct. So hold on, let me just round this out. So by recognition, now that Adam's explained this, the moment you get to that particular potential junction or split in the road, you've got to tie them down and say, if you're going to assume it, which they will be just by saying degrees, they're going to say, well, that's justified to the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. Where'd you get R? But you've got to know to ask it at that stage, which I didn't till Adam pointed this out.
Yeah, you can only get the 69 miles per degree if you put R in. That's what it works out at. If you multiply 69, guys, by 360, you'll see that it comes out to be their supposed equatorial distance, their circumference value.
It will also come out to be the diameter of a flat plane if you use it, which is which is one second, which is what Eratosthenes actually measured until he decided it's claimed he decided that the sun's rays were parallel.
Correct. Also, so that's why I said it was a split in the road. Just 1 second. Yes, that's why it's a split in the road. But by way of the language that will be used by anti-flat earthers, you may very well inadvertently find yourself on a sphere path without realising it. And you're right, Brian. Yeah, you can do it both ways. But you've got to recognise that fork in the road is being presented to you at this point.
Once you let them beg the question, it's no longer erroneous based on the premise that they've set up. So I ran into this after having gotten this information, and I took it online, and I got my butt handed to me. I said, and I realized immediately, well, why did I give them R?
You're not giving them R. They're taking the R, and they're basing everything on a circle. What you're talking about, what Adam's talking about, is a 2D circle, not a sphere. It's a 2D circle. Number one. Secondly, it's only based on the distance of the longitude lines from one side to the other, which is a diameter without parallel sun rays. Right? A diameter, if you want to call it a diameter, it's a diameter straight across without parallel sun rays. But there's a bigger problem. There is no C. There is no one-way speed of light measurement for this 443 light years away Polaris. So they can't claim that you have to have that all the light rays from Polaris comes in parallel. You understand what I mean? They can't claim all this nonsense. Like, they're trying to claim that every line off of their globe goes directly straight up towards Polaris, as opposed to the angular size that of a light we see in the sky, which it doesn't even have a real angular size. It's just, as even Rumpus admitted, all the stars are just point sources. So, they have a load of nonsense claims that are based on absolutely nothing. They still have to use an angle if they try to bring it to the center of their globe. They're still using an angle, right, to the center of, if they want to, kind of using the diameter to the diameter of their equator. They don't have anything. They have no R, they have no C. There's nothing. There's none of them can beat it.
Epic. Good conversation.
Can I just add something here?
Go ahead, George.
Well, if you are at 0 degrees on the equatorial line and you observe the northern star, that is your circle of equal altitude. It will be the diameter of the so-called sphere, because you need to have a circle of equal altitude. So the radius point on your reading will be the zenith of the polar star, the northern star, and you on the equator line at 0 degrees, you need to have a circle of equal altitude, and that will be your radius.
Yeah.
That is. Sorry.
Go on, Brian. Go on.
I just say that is, he's correct and incorrect, because their equator is not a circle of equal altitude. Their equator wouldn't be a circle of equal altitude if you're talking about a flat plane distance using that 69 miles per degree. It wouldn't be. It'd be closer to 39,000 miles. Just under 39,000 miles would be a circle of equal altitude then.
But their equator would be a hemisphere of equidistance from the center. It would not be a circle of equal altitude.
But he's right in his...
Yeah, that's the radius I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, he's right though. You are right in your premise. I don't mean to say you. I should say you are right in your premise that taking a distance to 0 degrees is basically a circle of equal altitude in reality from Polaris.
Except that doesn't match real world. As you can see.
I guess my point is, you don't need to beg the question of a sphere and calculate for a vertical drop which is non-existent.
Exactly.
Perfect. Right, you learn something new every day.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
It just exists in the math.
I mean, if you're a newbie and you're listening to this, you'll be like scratching your head going, what the hell are they talking about? Because what we're talking about is preemptively recognising where someone slips in a begging the question fallacy. And that even that description might go over some people's heads. But that's what we're doing. We're saying at this particular point of the discussion, the moment they say it moves in a degree, doesn't matter what they give it as the scale, they're just automatically assuming that that is going to be the degrees that you put out, like on a clock face. If you've got a globe with the centre of the clock being in the middle of the globe, as the hand moves round, you're going to count that as the degrees of motion. So it's automatically assumed by language. Now, Brian's also pointed out, well, you don't have to do that. Well, no, you don't. But when we're dealing with anti-flat earth fundies, that is what they'll do without saying a word. But they have, and that's what Adam's pointed out, the moment they say degrees, you go, oh, let's clarify what we mean. We're talking about degrees in terms of your vertex that you take off a sextant on a flat plane with a straight line to the GP, or are you talking from the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth? If so, where'd you get R?
Yeah, thanks for outlining that then, Adam, because I didn't quite realise that myself either. Yeah, you're exactly right on that, I believe. So yeah, that was very, very edifying.
But I can visualise it in my mind going down that path with a fundy and not seeing it. And then suddenly you're into, well, that can only work on a sphere, but it seems justifiable because you haven't recognised that 3 or 4 steps ago you hadn't asked for R. You hadn't said, why are we suddenly doing this with the assumption that it's moving around a curved surface? Why are we doing that? And you wouldn't recognise where the question got begged.
We flat earthers attribute that degree change in the sky to perspective and distance, and the sextant demonstrates how we can use that to calculate. They attribute that degree change to Earth curve. That's where it doesn't, there's no distance with it, because everything is off at an infinite point wherever you are on the ball. So the only change is rotation, is curvature. As you angle away or towards it, that's what changes it in there, and it's R that defines that rate of change.
Yes. No one's actually traveled 69 miles and went up. There's 1 degree. 16 up. There's 2 degrees. Like, no one's ever done that. They're just making stuff up mathematically.
But there are 3 things that's needed. You need the one-way speed of light measurement, doesn't exist. You need the R value measurement for a globe, doesn't exist. And you need sun rays and rays of light from claimed spheres to be parallel. It's crazy. No such thing. Doesn't exist.
Well, other than those things, it's all easy.
Yeah, it's proven other than that.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? This is the point where it's just getting assumed. So, yeah, you can get into that wrangle-dangle of how you've actually proved the spherical surface that's now being assumed by language of degrees. Well, yeah, you just ask them where they got their R value, and, you know, black swan, that's the end of the argument, basically, isn't it? But if you don't know, you're begging the question when you're 2 or 3 assumptions further down the line. It's a difficult job to backtrack. Hold on, back a minute ago when we were talking about degrees, it's like, who's going to do that when they don't know?
Well, yeah, because you've accidentally affirmed that, right? You've affirmed it, and you've gone far too far forward to sort of then undo your own language at that point, because then it's almost as if, again, you're backpedaling on what you yourself have said. So it would be important in order to sort of establish a language that would, again, not sort of, again, hand on the radius. They don't have the radius in the first place, but again, it's probably not a good idea to start off by sort of somewhat hand on the radius in order to take it away later, right?
I mean, you can always do that. I mean, back in the early days, I did do that. You know, you'd fall into all of these traps because you wouldn't recognise any of them. And then eventually, when you realised you're in a massive trap, you just ask them where they got their R value from. And then that would kind of bring it close to the argument. But that was before the black swan. You know, we were still asking people for R before the black swan came along. We've been asking for R for, I mean, I said more than 2 years. It's probably been more than 3 years.
Oh, no, it's been...
Nathan, what did I tell you in the pre-show?
A whole episode of asking Rumpus for R. It's great.
You remember what I told you in the pre-show?
You'll have to remind me.
The sextant, and where we have the argument, is taking them right back to R.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But with that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you first and foremost to both Discord and G+ panels making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, however, stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Massive thanks to all of you who smashed the PayPal link, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on a premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!
And put that 90 degree there, which is where you can, because you can get a central angle from the center of a circle in geometry. It's the only place. But we're showing them that the circle of equal altitude of how a sextant works on a flat surface is where you lay that two-dimensional circle, because the radius line can't bend. They want to now say, no, we live on a circle/sphere with a radius. Well, really, show us R then. Show us 8 inches per mile squared. Show us drop. Show us curvature. Well, we can't see it. So you presuppose the beautiful tool, the sextant, that works on flat surfaces and gives you a correct angle, and you took it to a place that doesn't exist nor you've ever seen to measure?
Yes.
Who named it the circle of equal altitude? Did they name it that?
Yes, it's on all of their...
Why would they name it that? Like, I don't understand.
Because they always have two opposing thoughts at the same time, and they live in cog-dis all the time, so they can't violate certain aspects of geometry, but they presuppose it all happening from the center, which they have never proven, been there, done that, ever.
But 10th man, it's really simple to apply a sextant, right? You just line it up with the apparent horizon, not the geometric horizon, and things will work out just fine.
The horizon dip correction, as soon as they accept that that is a reality, the horizon dip correction happens. That means they are accepting a flat 2D radius. Well, what radius is that? Right?
Yeah,
so as soon as they accept that, right, with the horizon dip correction, that is going to be the radius of a circle. As soon as they accept that, then they're relinquishing their own radius of the globe.
I think you're spot on, but forget the word accept. They teach that. It's a necessity.
Nobody's going to take my bait.
What was your bait?
Unless you want to be shouted at.
That the sextant, you have to line it up to the apparent horizon, not the geometric horizon, and things will work out fine.
That's correct. There is no geometric horizon. The geometric horizon only exists in the maths, Darwin.
Right, it's somewhere before the apparent horizon. That's where the geometric horizon is.
No. We only have one horizon, and the horizon in the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator, aka the horizon based on a radius 3959 value. That horizon is geometric. We only have one, and the horizon we see is not geometric. There isn't a second unseen horizon that is geometric, because the horizon by definition is apparent.
No, there is a geometric horizon. It just doesn't look like the other horizon.
Excuse me, direct quote. The geometric horizon is the horizon you would not expect to see. Quote, show.
Yeah, he's got it wrong. You would expect to see it. It just doesn't really look like the apparent horizon, right? But it's there in the picture, and it's closer by.
Stop it. It's driving me nuts. Stop. Apparent horizon. No, that's redundant. What's a horizon? By definition, the apparent position where the sky meets the land or sea. So if you say the apparent horizon, you are saying the apparent position where the sky meets the land or sea. Now, by definition, apparent, that means appearing. You see it, right? So to have a non-apparent horizon would be to have a non-apparent, non-visual, apparent position where the sky meets the land or sea.
Yes!
Sorry, that was funny. You were walking through it and I just saw it all in my head. I was like, yeah, that was cool, man.
Right. The geometric horizon just doesn't really look like the horizon we're used to seeing.
But it's not a horizon.
Doesn't mean it's there in the picture. It doesn't mean it's not there in the picture.
No, it does mean it's not there in the picture. It's either apparent, therefore a horizon, and we've only got one, or it isn't. If it's not the apparent position where the sky meets the land or sea, then it is not a horizon.
But it blocks things behind it. Right. It's just being loomed up from behind it back up again.
No, well, tell me how Al-Biruni got his dip angle measurement from the geometric horizon if they're saying it's not geometric.
They just didn't understand.
I didn't ask you what they didn't understand. How would he have done that?
Well, that's my answer, though.
That's his answer, I'm afraid, Eli. Tough luck. Yeah, Eli's right. The bottom line is Eli's correct. Where'd you get a geometric measured position if you're telling me it's refracted and not visible? So you're telling me Al-Biruni measured a refracted, not visible position that only exists in maths. So he didn't measure it then?
No, he just didn't realize where it was supposed to be yet. Right? So he was just still thinking that the apparent horizon is the geometric horizon, when that is incorrect. He should have looked closer by.
No, he actually measured a geometric physical sphere edge horizon to give him dip angle measurement so that he could derive R from it. Well, that's a geometric derivation. It's not that, oh, well, he was measuring the apparent horizon. That's redundant. He wasn't measuring the apparent position where the sky met the ground. He was just measuring the horizon, with an assumption that it's a geometric capable of deriving R-value position. Geometric being the operative word. Well, if you're to tell us that it's refracted, it's no longer geometric, therefore no longer capable of deriving R. This is the essence of the Black Swan.
But he should have already known the geometry based on the celestial angles to the Earth, right? So he should have already had an R value, even just in calculus, in order to establish where the geometric horizon would be in relation to the apparent horizon. Da da da.
Yeah, but it doesn't
He's
change.
just using the sextant the wrong way.
No, not
He's presupposing spherosity, even looking for radius in the first place.
It's not that he's presupposing it. He's attempting to measure it. That would be acquire its geometry. So it's not dun dun dun. No. It's because if he's no longer measuring its geometry, he's no longer measuring its geometry, Arwin.
How did he acquire his elevation, Paul?
We didn't need. He already knew it based on the celestial derived.
So what the hell was he measuring then?
He was just there to try and confirm it. And that is how terrestrial refraction was figured out.
And that's the story of... No, it isn't. It's the story of Al-Biruni utilising a dip angle derivation measurement of R by way of a physical geometric horizon. It can't be anything other than that, because if it isn't, he's not doing what he's claimed to be doing, Arwin.
In the old days, they used to just call it a lucky guess. Yeah,
No, I'm not having that either. Stop, Adam. Stop.
Let me qualify it in that it's one of these lucky mathematical guesses where they have these strange matchups. So just as luckily when they guessed that Venus had the same R value as Earth, yeah, when they guessed this and he went and he measured the optical horizon, he was just lucky that what he guessed was the non-visible geometric horizon was exactly at the same thing for the rest of his mathematics. That's...
Sorry, have you ever made a mathematical...
It wasn't.
Hold on. Hello? Yeah, thank you. Adam, so when you tend to have a best guess in mathematics, do you tend to climb mountains afterwards?
Well, maybe to celebrate that my guess was so lucky, but no. But that's the reality of what they're trying to claim, that this thing that isn't visible corresponded with an optical dissolution point that then matched. That's the only claim they can be making, that this quasi experiment that didn't measure, that they admit didn't measure anything, just happened to yield the results that match R.
But the results that match R are an implication that's utilised in begging the question proof from the perspective hijacking Earth curve calculators, that the same position is measuring physically blocks things. But if they're saying he's not measuring it and he can't derive it in physical terms, it just happened to coincidentally match with a optical effect we call the horizon, that just so happens to match what the physical horizon that's later claimed with the R value he measured to be physically blocking things in the same way he's physically measuring it?
Yes, it matches what you can't measure optically.
No, that's wrong.
Arwin, hello.
Blocks things in the
Arwin,
geometry,
hello, Arwin, you're making this unlistenable. Thank you. No. Match with the physicality, Adam.
Yeah, it will. What you measure in terms of optical dissolution matches with the thing that you can't measure optically, but it's physical.
Arwin, go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't block things in the optics. It only blocks things in the geometry, right?
No, it's just explained that they're saying it can't be seen optically. You're now taking the juxtaposition that it is physical, when it's clearly not physical by what you claimed in the first instance. Not physical.
No, it's only physical in the geometry.
It's only physical in the math.
Exactly, there it is. It's only physical in the maths. So on paper, in Muppet Vision geometry, it's physical. In reality, the horizon's not physically blocking a damn thing, even though it's claimed to be, because it's obviously physically Earth curve blocking things, even though optically it doesn't do that.
Well, it does block things, but then when you zoom in, it comes back into view, which just goes to show that zooming in is quite miraculous because you can literally look behind geometric concealed objects with it. Isn't that amazing?
No, that's just a calculation that you can extrapolate from the Rayleigh criterion based on aperture size.
No, I think it proves that you can actually look around the corner with optics. And that would absolutely reaffirm the nature of the ball Earth.
No, because the nature of the ball Earth takes a position, a vantage point that you don't get. So to make that assertion in terms of drop values, physical horizons and things being obscured behind them, then you've got to have a worldview that's optically unrepresentable in the first instance. Looking at the side of your own head on the target in the same frame isn't possible, but it's the only way to make the geometric assertion of a physical Earth curve edge horizon.
And that's a begging the question fallacy.
Well, I think it's a good time to read, if the Earth is a sphere with a radius of 3,959 miles, p, then every horizon distance measurement must be no more than 1.225 times square root of observer's height in feet, q. Geometric horizon, curve calculators. Not q, horizon distance is greater than 9.41 miles, therefore not p. Earth is not a sphere.
That doesn't take into account refraction.
Yeah. Refraction's based on an R-value measurement at 7/6 of the radius in standard form. That's terrestrial, otherwise known as atmospheric or standard refraction. Well, their standard rate is based on R at 7/6 of a radius and can be massaged any way in either direction based on the radius. Well, in order to get the radius, you've got to have a physical horizon to drive it. Now, Arwin's recent comeback that, well, it's refraction, means we haven't got a physical horizon then.
And it's another begging the question for you, Arwin, in the last 120 seconds.
We do. You just can't see it.
Well, if we can't see it, it's not a horizon. Therefore, we can't see Earth curve. Because the notion that we can see a physical horizon to obscure things and measure drop values with is the assertion based on R. So if you say we can't see it, we can't see Earth curve, Arwin.
But we can still see the apparent horizon, but the geometric horizon just doesn't seem to look like an horizon.
It's funny because some of them claim they have like 5-6 different types of horizons, but the one that supposedly blocks things is the one that we can't see.
Yes.
Irony much?
That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line here. They're out on the globe side to go about their day under the assumption that the horizon's Earth curve. That's the assumption. Now, when we point out that the horizon's not Earth curve, they'll tell us that we've got 7 horizons and the only one we can't see is the Earth curve one. Like, that's a rebuttal. Oh, well, the one that was supposed to be blocking things into the distance with its physical nature to prove that we've got Earth curve as a horizon, that's now refracted. I mean, it's still blocking stuff with its physical geometric nature, even though we can't derive any geometry from it when it's refracted. You know, it's a complete cluster screw.
So
I don't want to hear any.
Just makes things behind it visible again.
Real quick, Ted, this is a joke. I don't want to hear any baller saying that's the bottom line. You better start saying that's the bottom's curve. That's it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to rebut as well. Though this is the bottom line with regards to Al-Biruni, Nathan. I'm sharing screen and quite proud it got mentioned in class yesterday on Mitchell's mentioned it as well now. This is the bottom line with the assumptions of all that Al-Biruni makes. He's off trying to measure distances, you know, between an O and B in reality, how much curve there is between there and that leading edge. But in his initial assumptions, because he has to figure out how high the mountain is, and you can't just run a tape measure down the center, middle of it, he has to use a little bit of real geometry, which would be sextant based. The implication of what he does and how he does it is that he makes the pre-assumption, and all of his calculations imperative on this, that the distance between A and B, which is the measured distance, not O and A, because that's what you can't measure, is a flat plane in which he's measuring it on. Without that assumption, none of it can be calculated to get the height. For them to go on to calculate how much that surface is curving, that he's already predefined as flat. It's a paradox in itself, just that bit.
Well, the start of his measurements is flat. In order to beg the question that the ground beneath his feet is curving away from him, he must first measure it flat.
Not just measure it flat, but make a fundamental geometric statement that it is flat. Because without it being flat, the beta and alpha angles can't have any inference, because without therefore knowing the rate of curve, which is what you're off to go and measure, you couldn't calculate what the angle is. The only way you can measure it is if you know it's flat, then you can work forward from there. But what you couldn't do without knowing the rate of curve is to calculate the angle.
So, to put it a different way, Al-Biruni first had to utilise the flat plane we dwell atop in order to assume an R-value measurement thereafter.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, he took geometric considerations, right, Chocolate?
That's my
Well, yeah,
shit.
flat ones, when he got the height of the mountain.
Nathan, I got some complimentary slides in Master B. Might as well go through them.
Give me 10 seconds.
10th can give you that.
Okie dokie. Ready when you are.
Which one do you have up first? The one with the sun on the flat plane?
Yes.
Okay, this is a beauty, is it not? So H elevation, Z zenith angle, A azimuth angle. Notice how they got it. They've got the sun directly over. That's the GP directly underneath. There you are. And there's your angle. You also have a GP too right there. So this is in the reverse. This is, you're in the middle of the circle here and the sun's on the outside, so to speak. You see how that works there? You need an angle is, what's necessary for an angle is 2 straight lines. For triangulation, it's 3. Next slide. Brian's gonna love this one. So this is a picture, one of the Ballers navigation sites. They got the GP of the sun. They've got sun rays coming in parallel, which they don't. And look at that radius line, Brian. Does it look straight or bent?
If it's a radius, it has to be straight.
Right, but in the picture, it's
Bendy
bent.
radius.
We got a bendy
radius.
We got a bendy radius here. This picture is ludicrous. This is nonsense. And then you got the line of position. That's you somewhere on the circle. Okay, next slide. So azimuth and altitude for northern latitudes, doesn't matter. But the whole point is, look at that horizontal. Straight line, 90. No bendy radius here. Next line. Another picture of it. This one showing the sun directly over, you in the middle. No bendy radius here. Next one. Adam will like this one. Obviously, Al-Biruni worked from the seashore, then went up to the mountain, but there's how you get the proper correction for height above sea level, horizontal, flat plane, baseline, in order to get an angle, not a radius that bends. Next slide. This one's cool. This one's showing the horizon, the line to the GP. Once you use the azimuth to get the bearing, not the distance. The azimuth is the bearing to the GP, and then your apparent direction until you find your actual direction. Next one. I think that's it, or was that it? That's it.
It's got a NASA direction on how to build a sextant.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I thought there was one more. Build a simple sextant, NASA. Sheet. This is zenith angle. Subtract this angle from, don't say it, and you have found the object's altitude angle, or the height in degrees of the object above the horizon. Object zenith angle, altitude angle, don't say it. Observing celestial objects, when viewing any celestial object at night, find an area away from lights. Can't say that word though.
Yeah, well, you have to, because a lot of people listen to this as opposed to watch. So that which cannot be said is 90 degrees. So subtract this angle from 90 degrees and object zenith angle, altitude angle, and then in brackets 90 degrees zenith angle, close brackets.
So we're subtracting something that's not needed. Oh, sorry.
Yes, you're going to need 90 degrees in every instance to do this triangulation measurement. Yes, Adam.
They really need it when they presuppose it from the center, though. Then they like to mention it.
That's not what's done. So I've just brought up what you had on the third from last slide before you showed the right dip correction measure. Dip correction. So you said on this particular slide, not a curved radius on this one. So I'll just go back to that slide, the one, so I can reference what you're talking about. So curved radius appear, right, for the area of equal altitude that's going to be asserted when you've got the sun's rays coming into the GP of the sun on a sphere with a curved radius. What the fuck is this? Anyway, how it's actually done is a flat two-dimensional circle with a flat line meeting the GP of the star at 90 degrees. Now, it's not drawn in here, but you could draw a little box below this sun depiction to represent the fact that this is a 90-degree angle here. And this is a straight radius on a flat circle representing an area of equal altitude. So this radius must be, as all radii are, straight. Not curved, straight. Now, there's no assume you've got a line running down the centre of your sphere called an equator, and that's going to be your straight line. There's no assuming parallel light rays coming into a spherical surface with any adjustments needed. Just the sun above a flat plane with 90 degrees to it. And a straight, flat line from your feet to the bottom of the land wherever the sun may be. And that is it. Flat Earth.
What they're doing in that diagram is they are using chords through their sphere. Now, we've already spoken about how the chord length will always be less than the arc that resides within it, within the circle. So the chord length that they will use, which will be a diameter of their circle. Like they'll do an actual flat horizontal measurement and create a circle of equal altitude, and then they'll put that circle on their 2D circle onto their 3D sphere. Then they will use that diameter of that 2D circle as a chord through their sphere, and just pre-assume that the arc that resides within it now, that will be going over that diameter, will be equal in distance, when it is not. It is much greater in distance.
That's not how it's described in this diagram. So you're saying this diagram's wrong for their description of how they do it, because they haven't drawn a chord and they've literally labelled it radius. So they've got their line of position as a massive circle takes up, almost an entire hemisphere. but the line of position is being drawn out with a radius that is actually curved. I mean, it's just incorrect. But you're now saying that what they'd actually do is they'd draw a chord, they'd slice the top of this off to give you the line of position, but that's not how it's depicted. Presumably because if they did, you'd have half a circle, and it would look ludicrous. And the value of where that would place this dot, where it's got GP of the sun in this black and white diagram, wouldn't make sense on a spherical surface, because suddenly it's inside the sphere. Well, that isn't how it's depicted here, and literally they've gone, which is the lesser of two evils? Let's draw a chord through it and show it sliced off, or just show a bendy radius. Lesser of two evils? Yeah, let's use the bendy radius one. Okay, let's do that. It's like, radius? What the hell's this? You know, this is ludicrous. This
like
is a radius.
Freudian slips to me. You know, I was looking at that diagram, and you know, I would say they're chopping the top. I was wondering what LOP stood for, and I thought it was where they lopped the top off the ball.
Lop here.
Yeah.
Nice one, Adam.
But no, if you straighten out that radius, and how much bigger does that circle become? So that's the proof that they use the chord through their sphere. Because if you straighten out that radius, the circle will be bigger in diameter than the sphere will go through it, like Correct. A pool ball down into a pocket.
Is that true though?
Yeah, look at
because like if it like I mean the way I think of it, I'm thinking of area, right? So if I take a paper and bend it, and then I straighten it out, it's still the same, just like the same length.
Draw a straight line.
I don't know.
Yeah, draw a straight line, draw an arc over the line, then see. That's the difference. You're starting off with the curve and you're going back to straight. If you start off with a curved distance, it'll be the same when you straighten it out. But if you start off with a straight distance and you try and put that straight distance onto, like, we're talking about a circle, a 2D circle. You put the diameter of that 2D circle. You put that circle onto a 3D sphere, then that's the diameter of that circle becomes a chord through the sphere. The distance from any two sides the distance of a measurement of that diameter will always be less than the arc that resides above it now. Always. I'll give you the best example. I'll give them the best example. The diameter of the globe Earth, right, is about 8,000 miles, right? The globe Earth model, right? But the arc that resides over it is over 12.
Yeah, just imagine a balloon. You draw a line on it on a quarter of the balloon and then you blow it up. The pen marker will become faded because it's stretched. It's got longer as you've blown the balloon up. Well, in this diagram, what they will use on a chord will move as a flat radius exactly the same as this one. So you've got the centre point moving to the outside edge with a flat circle around it. Well, that's what they've got to do. But in this diagram, where they actually take the measurement from, they've still had to draw this straight, flat line on the top of it to give you the angle that you're actually measuring. So on this black and white spherical diagram, you've got a horizon line. Why is this perched on the top of a sphere? Well, because this is how you actually measure the angle. Now, what Brian's saying is, if you then translate that into this sphere, which is totally unnecessary and isn't done, I might add, but if you do, suddenly the line that you're going to assume to the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth versus the angle that you actually measure to the GP, which would be above this line, I might add, doesn't have the same measurement when you curve the line up and around to the actual position it would represent on a curved surface. Now, to take this measurement, you've got to draw a chord and a straight line through it to get an actual radius for your area of equal altitude. Now, that straight line, which I'm drawing my mouse over now for the audience, from the GP of the sun to the centre of this circle is straight and flat. And that's how it's measured. Well, that, comparatively speaking, on this diagram, is this line extended out to the GP of the sun. That's how it's actually done. But when you translate that into the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth, with parallel light rays coming in all across the Earth, you've then got a longer line because it's curving up and out when it becomes the actual position on a sphere. as opposed to the position in the center when you've got the, as Adam humorously pointed out, this section lopped off, literally sliced off, like a guy's come along with a samurai sword in Fruit Ninja, taken this entire section off. Then you can have your straight radius line. But it changes the position. It's going to be further out if you then plot that on a map, because you've got a longer line for this bent radius, as ludicrous as to say.
Yeah, it's obvious what they did is they, with this diagram, that what would have happened with the black and white one with the curved radius is they would have actually done a flat measurement, and with this one, they actually didn't use a chord. They actually just curved it around our boa. Because, as I said, if they straightened out that radius, then the diameter of the circle would be greater than the diameter of the sphere. So they're just begging the question here, but in a kind of a reverse manner. So they're creating a flat circle of equal altitude. They're just bending it onto, because the circle of equal altitude they created, if you look at that radius, is greater in diameter than the diameter of the sphere. So what they've done is they just made a bigger circle of equal altitude than the sphere is, and just curved it down onto the sphere. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
You get what I mean?
No, I do, exactly. But the bottom line's always going to be the same. The reason they draw this horizon line, as it's labelled on this diagram, is because that's the actual angle measurement. So although they stop the line here, it would just extend all the way out to 90 degrees below the star, as depicted in this diagram. That's how it's actually done. So as much as they can tell us about how all of these assumptions take place, that's not how it is done. And that's why they've got to draw this line on the top of the sphere with a man standing there. Because the actual angle measurement is this angle, out to the position, and this arrow at the top represents where the actual position of the sun would be. Now they've just massively increased it and said all light comes in parallel when it does not. Doesn't change the fact that this is the angle you're measuring. Why? Well, because this is where this man is pointing to from the flat plane he's standing on. This is the line he is triangulating with. And what's he going to get? Well, the 90 degrees they don't like talking about. That happens to have this awkward GP of the sun labelling and this line here in the way of where the 90 degrees that you actually need would be. But it's still required and still used, and it's still absolutely there in this diagram. This is 90 degrees. Well, why isn't it like to be talked about? Well, because in their diagrams, all of this supposition of line of position that's going to be taken as a chord or assumed to be a bendy radius, all of those things never happen. And if they did, it would skew all the measurements, because suddenly the GP's down here now.
Hey, Nathan, go to Master B. Start with the one that's called.
Sorry, 1 second, Ted. Before you go, sorry, I was speaking there, I was on mute. If you look at the black and white image, look at his actual radius, and you can see that his actual radius is greater than the radius of his globe, proving that they made a bigger circle of equal altitude, a bigger diameter circle than the diameter of their globe, and they just laid it on and basically pulled it down over it like a hat. Sorry, Ted.
No problem. It's a joke to bend the radius. I mean, it's stupid.
Well, let's move on to this diagram where it's literally got an area of equal altitude labelled, but laid on top of a curved surface. This is a contradiction in terms.
Yeah, 3,000 nautical miles, right?
Yeah.
Is that the one? Okay, now notice that other one was off because it showed a curved radius. This one is off because it shows divergent rays. I mean, can't they make up their mind? You see that, right?
In the aftermath description of how it potentially could be done if they made a whole load of suppositions that aren't actually in effect when you take an angle to the GP of a star or the sun. Yeah, this nonsense cluster screw is an after the fact, isn't actually applied nonsense explanation with divergent star rays.
Yeah, exactly. Go to the next one. So in your sight reduction, the analogy of observing a flagpole is often used to describe the circle of equal altitude principle. An observer who sees the flagpole at a certain altitude will be on a circle with an equal distance around the pole. If another observer sees the top of the flagpole at a higher altitude, then he is on a circle that is closer to the flagpole. If another observer sees the top of the flagpole at a lower altitude, his circle of equal altitude must be further from the pole. Now, we can easily say, if you were standing near Polaris, it would fit one of these descriptions. And the last one would be, if you were near the equator, the observer sees the top of the flagpole at a lower altitude, his circle of equal altitude must be further from the pole. And Adam said perspective, which is very true, but the sextant measures angles, so that would be one heck of a circle of equal altitude. The next slide. We laughed at this the other day, but this is from one of the Sextant educational sites on YouTube. We can laugh at it again. Does anybody want to say something before we contrast it to the next one?
This one speaks for itself. It's absolutely ludicrous, but this is literally how they play it out. They put a flat plane on top of the sphere, but then actually draw in the triangulation measurements. It's like, that would place this sun, by way of this angle, over here. It's just so preposterous.
Indeed. Go to the next one, which is from the same educational channel, showing it the right way. So how can you do this the right way and then show it that way?
Let's just ask the audience that question. This, as depicted on screen now, celestial body sextant angles, has the 90 degree to the GP of this sun or star, and the angle you would measure from the boat, assuming that you're taking the angle from the bottom. In other words, if you're standing at the top of this tower, if you assume this is an observation tower on the boat, you'd have to make a correction to bring the angle down to the level surface you will have to get 90 degrees to the sun or the star. That's your triangle. That's all you've got. Flat bottom, angle to star, straight line down from where its position is. Now let's look at that on a sphere. Now, what's the problem with this depiction, ladies and gentlemen? I've just put the first diagram that we laughed at yesterday with its seesaw on top of a sphere. Does this look reasonable? No? What's wrong with this picture? Oh, it's because the surface that's proposed, the curved surface, doesn't have a straight line to do this with. Oh, right. But do we actually do it this way? No, we do it this way with a flat surface. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, Chuck, you go first. You were going to say something before.
No, I was just going to say, it's like they didn't even try. They just put it on top of a ball and said, look, this is how it works. Like,
that dude is like 2,000 feet tall. Probably more. I don't even know.
Bro, this is cringe, this cartoon right here, bro. Are you serious?
We're in Discord, Nathan, so they should be able to see and comment in there now as well.
Okay.
I just want to say, when the Globers try and use, but like, cause, you know, yeah, Bob the Science Guy, right? Classic, right? Claiming that chords are never used. Then he goes and uses, and this is after he's used the diameter of the globe, the center of his globe as a vertex, right? So, besides the fact that all the distances are out when you're using straight lines as opposed to arcs, right? Diameter as an arcs, right? There's a bigger problem. Why is it, where are they going to this, like, by them going to the center of their globe and also speaking about horizon dip correction is contradictory. Why would you be doing horizon dip correction if you're going to go to the center of a globe? So what did the mariners actually do? Did they actually use horizon dip correction, or do they use the center of their globe? They use horizon dip correction, they use straight lines. For straight line radii and diameters, for circles, 2D circles of equal altitude.
So I have that objection to that, the phrase, Brian, that horizon dip angle correction. It implies some kind of dipping horizon thing. That is not what the correction does. Tim's covered it a number of times. It brings you back down level with the plane. You know, it's the observer height correction factor is the reality of what it's doing to really make the corners of those triangles as accurate as they can be, because you have this known discrepancy for the triangle in that you know you're X amount of feet off the water, which is your baseline, and that's what you correct for.
Just show that with my mouse.
So
Hold
you're
on,
just
one sec.
bringing your
Just one
eyes
sec.
down.
Hello, just one sec. So I'll just show it on screen. So if, as correctly identified, because this has come from someone that's trying to explain how this whole process works, they've drawn out the angle from the bottom of the boat. Very useful for this example. So correctly, your flat plane gives you your first line and 90 degrees to the position below the star, as we've previously explained. But if you were to take this measurement, and Brian tried to explain this on a clip that I released today, if you were up a high building, or in this case at the top of this observation tower on the boat, and you take your angle to the star or sun, it's different. You've got a different angle. So you have to correct for it. In other words, you have to do the maths to bring your position back down to the bottom of the boat where it meets the sea in this instance. So that's a height correction, but it's been labelled dip angle correction. Well, it's not. It's a height correction. You're higher off the ground, i.e. the flat surface, so you've got to correct for that. There is no flat level plane in between you and the air that you're looking through if you're taking the measurement from up here on the observation tower. So it's just a height correction to put you back on the ground when you take the measurement. That's all it does.
There's some more
I have to disagree. Sorry, Tent, 1 second. I have to disagree that because when they say, sorry, no, Tent, just because Adam said it to me and what Nate just said, it's not that you're wrong by saying it's a height correction for the vertex of your angle. It is an horizon dip correction. But what that means is that if you're standing on a boat and you're 10 foot above the water, by them speaking about horizon dip correction, they're automatically, right, admitting that your horizontal eye line is making a parallel with the water surface. Because if you're 10 foot above the water and your horizon is out from you, then you're 10 foot above your horizon. That's just the way it is. Above like you're 10 foot above the water level. So your horizon, which is where the earth and sky appear to meet, right? The earth part of that is 10 foot below your horizontal eye line. So when they bring that parallel eye line down to the water surface, when they say horizon dip correction, they're admitting that there's two horizontal lines making a parallel. That's what they're admitting.
Right.
I would say the first measurement, the obtaining your horizon, generates your parallel line, and then the correction brings that parallel line to the surface of the water.
Well, a lot of people you probably wouldn't be thinking about because I would understand why only I would be thinking about it. But the very explanation I gave for optical drop involves one optical and one physical horizontal making a parallel with each other.
Right.
So when both appear to supposedly disappear in the distance, they're just getting smaller in angular size now, besides all the other effects that happen across water. And the boat appears to go below your horizontal eye line.
Right, because the ground that you're actually looking at is below you.
Yes.
Hashtag shit shrinks.
Yeah, but it's more. What Brian's saying is there's more to it than that. Yes, stuff can move into the distance, get smaller and smaller and smaller, and then eventually disappear. But you can observe that from slightly below it. So let's say you're talking about a 100-foot boat sailing out from the harbour, and you watch it with your binoculars. Well, when it starts at the harbour, it's considerably higher than you are, and as you watch it, the angle reduces, but it's reducing down to your eye line. Now, your eye line will be your representative position at the horizon that you can see out from your perspective. And as you go up and observe the same thing, so you now jump in a hot air balloon and you go 100 foot above the ground, you're now level with the top of the boat. As it moves away from you, it's moving towards your horizon, which is still going to rise with your eye level, but the ground that represents that is now 100 feet below you. So that's a further dip in terms of the physicality of the ground beneath your feet, on top of the diffraction limit, if you're viewing it with a camera, calculable with the Rayleigh criterion, but it's a second effect. Now that effect, Brian's saying, would be accurately described as horizon dip, because the horizon is the point where the land, which is now 100 feet below you, will meet the sky. Well, it's not only going to be determined by the size of the hole in your eye or the camera you're viewing it with, but also how high above you are above that physical ground or water. Right, Brian?
Yes, Nathan, exactly. If you look at the diagram where the boat has done the horizon dip correction, if you put another boat next to that of the same exact size and sail it away from that boat 4 or 5 miles, or less, just a couple of miles, then that person standing on that boat, looking at the other person, the standing on the other boat, is going to, they're both going to appear dropped to each other, because below each other's eye line, because they're both above the baseline, which is the water surface. So, like, if things are getting smaller in the distance, and the base of that thing is 10 foot below your horizontal eye line, then it's going to go below eventually. When it gets small enough, it will go below your horizontal eye line. So the horizon dip correction is just that effect. But they didn't realize it, basically. But they weren't dealing with it as a visual effect. They were doing it for the vertex, but of the angle. But it's just that thing.
I know you say we just didn't realise it. You did realise it. One of my Patreons, Life is Short, and I've referenced this a few times. He covered this with me and Ranty and Red Pill Philosophy. So he did like a 5-hour presentation on this, and he did explain it. The widening of the angle as you raise in altitude in respect to your eye level. So when people say, does the horizon rise to eye level? Well, no, the horizon is your eye level. However, you're still viewing land into the distance. And if you're considerably higher than that land, you're looking down on it with a downward angle. Well, that's considerably different in terms of the optical effect it will induce with things at distance, whether you're looking up to it or looking down to it, whether you've got a wide angle of view to it or a narrow angle to view to it. So, as I say, it's coming back to me because it's been presented to me, but you don't realise the wider reaching implications till you start discussing stuff like this when you're referencing a flat plane. But if you're higher than that plane, you're eventually got to drop it down, but you can only do that maths, this is where I'm driving at here, if you've got them both running parallel with each other. Because this is a further problem that I'm hoping Adam will explore. If this dip correction was taking place on a sphere, you'd have to do some quite complicated maths to reduce the overall radius value that you'd then have, wouldn't you, Adam?
It's impossible, because you'd have to know how far away the horizon is and then apply R to it for you to then calculate the net effect that the curvature has on the angles. So it can only work on the flat plane because you're taking those two parallel lines, which are parallel, because they're both, one you've ascertained locally as flat using your horizon, and then you're bringing it to that known flat plane. But if you try to put that onto a curve, to calculate anything, you've got to know the rate of curve, and you've also got to know the distance to see how much curve plays out, and that is proportional to R.
No, you missed my point. Yes, that's correct, but further to that, the rate of curvature, if you're at a higher elevation, is also increased. And when you bring that level down to the ground, they don't sit on top of each other. They're not running parallel. It's suddenly, the penny has finally dropped, Brian, why you got so agitated about this. Because where I've just explained that when you've got an increased radius value to calculate into it, which they haven't done to date, they don't sit on top of each other. In other words, you can't lower the line of your eye with an increased radius value because you're higher up off the surface to lay flat perfectly on top of the ground below you with a decreased radius value. And that calculation certainly isn't being done with the dip correction that we're talking about. So therefore, the dip correction's critical because it's making the level of the triangle flat and square with the GP of the star or sun. Well, if you start ignoring that fact of geometry and the reality that the dip correction has to run parallel or it won't work, you're ignoring the fact that this is a very strong flat Earth proof. If I just, as I did, just go, oh, well, don't worry about the dip correction. It's like, no, the dip correction can only be manifest because you've got two lines running parallel with one another, and an increased assumption of an R value at a higher altitude won't jive mathematically when you do the dip correction, right, Brian?
Yeah, it won't. It won't work mathematically. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Like, your vertex is in the wrong place, isn't it?
I think the way I describe, I get you now. You basically, if you curves your x-axis, you've got different scales on your x-axis, so they won't fit because they're dealing with different
curve rates.
Yeah,
different size circles.
Odds.
So it doesn't matter if you've got two circles, one bigger than the other. You can't lay them on top of each other and have it match. That's the bottom line. And if you increase your height above what is presumed to be a curved surface beneath your feet, you've essentially increased the radius value that you've then got to back calculate to give you the dip correction. Well, you can't do it.
Not non-superimposable.
Well, are you talking about my frustration on Friday? On the Friday show?
Yeah. I didn't get it. I didn't get the importance. Yeah. I sort of got it. Now I get it.
I just got it.
Yeah.
I admit, Brian, I understand the point now mathematically what you're making. Yeah. It's
yeah, same.
Yeah. Well,
apples and oranges.
Yeah. Well.
Hey, Adam, share the slide I just sent you because it's to Brian's point.
My point was that my point was, and this might be an extension to this, right, is that when it's from the eye line to the horizon and you don't do the dip correction, then it's optical. When you do the dip correction, then it's geometric, it's physical. So there's no way around it. So they can mess around with opticals, but they can't mess around with physicals, geometrics, if you know what I mean.
Yes, no, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. Nathan, I put a video into Master B that will demonstrate that optical drop thing for people. It's at 1:08. You'll have to turn off the sound of it. It's at 1 minute and 8 seconds, and I show the optical drop if you want to show it to the audience.
Time for like that slide where it says visible horizon. Really? The other one would not be visible?
No, it is visible. It just doesn't look like the apparent horizon, right?
Oh,
it's closer by. Like, just angle down a little bit before the apparent horizon. That's where the geometric horizon is.
I'd like to finish the rest of my slides, but this is really sharing what Brian's concern was, and Brian just accelerated the trap.
Well, just before you do, I'm just going to let out his video play out. So I've just played the last from whatever timestamp you gave me, 1:08. You've just shown it. I've just had it on screen, Brian, just so you know.
Thank you, Nathan.
I'll just let it play through one more time because you can, I assume, do it one more time. Yep, you are. I know. You've stopped. Okay, right. Yeah, it played through though, Brian. So I'm going to go back to the Hangout where we've got. Let's just make it look a bit more pretty. Okie dokie.
Yeah, just so people got to see what optical drop was. That's all. To see the effect makes it more easier. Okay.
Okay, right. I've got Adam's screen presented with, I think, 10th Man wanting to talk about this image.
Well, a little bit on this, but I want to finish up the rest of Master B. But yeah, so what Brian is saying is displayed right here. So see the observer in this orthographic view. And I mean, this is ridiculous. It's not to scale or anything, but surface of the Earth to them is curved, right? Geographical horizon, visible horizon, the dip, and then the sensible horizon. Well, what is dip when you're using the sextant for measuring angles? It's you've got to get a zero baseline. So that's why everybody minuses the height that they're above sea level so that they can get within a half a mile to a mile of their destination, something maybe 3,000 miles away, let's say. And so here's them depicting it over a curved surface, which it could never work on because the sextant wouldn't even work on the surface. I mean, there's so many things wrong with each of the slides that I pull off from their sites because they contradict at the same time they're trying to push their presupposition. A sextant can never work on this blue surface whatsoever.
This is hilarious, man. It's like their geographical horizons. Like it's not even. It's like moot point. the sensible horizon, whatever that is, and then the visible one.
Right. There's lots of horizons, but there's only one apparent horizon, the one that actually looks like a horizon, but the rest are there, just like the geometric horizon is a little bit closer by.
My God.
Even if you deduct dip on this rendition of the curved blue surface, it still wouldn't work. Because sextant can't work on any curved surface. That's what you got to remember.
If you could just take me off screen a sec, Nathan, while I just change the picture. Flip back to Al-Biruni, but it's the same. It's the same point. I've merged two of his calculations. So just give me a off screen.
A little bit, because I can just make it so they can't see anything from you. There you go. Oh, that's disgusting. I see why you wanted us to transition away.
It's the Riley bit, yeah.
Ugh.
All I've done there, look, it's back on now. Is take the two diagrams from the Al-Biruni document and put them together, and hopefully it shows you what he's doing in the real world, dealing with straight, flat planes to calculate the height of the mountain, which I think is very accurate. It's done on a straight flat. And how he takes that bit of maths and then applies it to the background image with the curve to reify a horizon as a geometric edge. But just, I mean, it's a little exaggerated, but you can see the point in being between the real world measurements to calculate the height of the thing, which is based on geometry with straight-sided triangles, and what it then turns into with regards to curvy bases. And then you can see the two are just not commensurate. They don't fit together yet. This is two sides of the same calculation that he goes to demonstrate that the horizon is geometric Earth. That's the farce.
What's the one thing that does not belong in this mess of a diagram? Well, the only thing that doesn't work.
Well, they've got two lines, haven't they? The sensible horizon line along the top. That's this 90 degree to the zenith position where Al-Biruni is measuring from. That's the sensible horizon. Then, check it out. The line he needed for the height of the mountain runs parallel with it.
Once you're done, you go to master B, the S1, S2, S3 without the writing, and then the second slide will be the one with S1, S2, S3 with the writing.
Okay.
Okay, so here we got three circle of equal altitudes. You see that box there that says 90 degrees? That box destroys a curved Earth. These are thousands of miles apart from each other, and where they cross each other at a single point is where you are observing. It's where you are holding the sextant. It's where you are using a flat plane to get that box. This is from their sites. This is how they say it's done. And at the same time, putting it on a curved surface, which can't work. Go to the next slide, which describes the S1 by itself, as well as showing the slide I just showed. You start at the middle. It says, let's say from this point. From this, a navigator knows he is on a specific circle along the plane of the surface of Earth, of radius r, known as the line of position. He does not know his direction from this point. However, by examining a second star, a second radius can be deduced. The navigator now knows he is at one of the points where both of the circular functions meet. In the case that there is only one real route, he knows his position. Although this is only possible if the radii are parallel.
Yeah, I was laughing at that before. It's like, oh, the plane of the surface of the Earth. Oh, okay. While he's calculating his radii, which are both on what? A flat surface.
Well, if you go back to the black and white picture where they show the radius curving, that's not parallel.
Well, to me, it sounds a bit weaselly, as Nathan would say, because the truth is that all the zeniths have to be parallel. And they didn't want to say that because that means it's not a globe. So it's easier, the kind of secondary statement of all the radii have to be parallel. It's the zeniths that have to be parallel along with the radii because the zeniths have to make a 90-degree.
Correct.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
but there's
how
many
can
ways.
anybody's zeniths be parallel on a globe?
That's why it's over for them.
Yeah, that's almost more devastating than the radius. If the zenith is not parallel, well then, what are we doing? We all got different zeniths, and they're just covering away from each other. Are you serious?
The simplest thing destroys them, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Bad business for the globe, 2021.
Well, can and does the sextant work without the horizon dip correction for accuracy?
No. In order to get an accurate position, you must get your eyeballs onto the surface of the water.
So sorry, I thought you were finished. If a globe believer or an anti-flat earther states this as a reality, that the horizon dip correction is a reality. If they state that, but then they also state that they're taking an angle from the center of the sphere, does one not contradict the other there? As why would you need a horizon dip correction if you're going to take an angle from the center of your sphere?
I agree.
Interesting.
I do think it contradicts itself. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, that does sound interesting. Yep.
I think the mathematical difference there is the first one you're taking, say, 20 foot up. The difference in the angle is 0 to 20 minus 0, isn't it? But actually, which is significant, as we see, but you wouldn't bother making the correction if the difference was 3,659 miles and 20 feet and 3,659 miles. The differential between that is insignificant, so you wouldn't factor it in, but it is factored in.
With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's after show possible. Of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, hitting the PayPal link and all that good stuff. Also, below this video, you can get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.